My wife didn't just cheat. She chose a mob boss. What I did next, let's just say, they never saw it coming. Let me tell you about us. My name's Eric, and I've been married to Jessica for 6 years. From the outside, we seemed like the golden couple. You know the type. 2 successful careers, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and the kind of chemistry that made people say, "You're so lucky to have found each other." But marriage is tricky. Beneath the surface, things had started to shift. Little cracks appeared here and there, but I was too distracted to see what they meant. Work kept me busy, and Jessica had been taking on new projects, spending more time out with friends or on business meetings. The distance between us didn't feel intentional at first. I mean, life gets hectic, right? I'd brush it off, convincing myself that this was just a phase. Couples go through rough patches. Jessica and I were solid, or so I thought. Looking back now, the signs were there. Her sudden obsession with fitness, the new outfits, the way her phone was always locked and turned face down on the table. I didn't want to see it for what it was. Not yet, anyway. The first real jolt came during a lazy Saturday morning. Jessica was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through her phone with that smile, the one that used to be just for me. I asked her what she was looking at, and she quickly flipped her phone face down. "Oh, just some memes," she said, her tone overly casual. I laughed it off, but something about her reaction stuck with me. That night, I saw her texting under the covers. When I asked who she was talking to so late, she mumbled, "Just Rachel. You know, girl talk." It felt off. Rachel was her childhood best friend, and while they were close, their late-night texts were usually saved for emergencies or big news. The doubt began to grow. She started going out more often, always with excuses that didn't quite add up. A new client, networking drinks, a quick girls' night out. The reasons seemed endless. One evening, as she was leaving in an unusually expensive outfit for a quick coffee meeting, I tried to joke about her newfound social life. "You're busier than a CEO these days," I said, grinning. She paused, her hand tightening on the doorknob. "Networking is important, Eric. Not everyone gets to work from home in their pajamas." The words stung, but her tone, defensive, almost accusatory, hit me harder. I watched her walk out the door, my gut twisting. That was the night I started paying closer attention. A week after that night, I noticed Jessica had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she showered. It wasn't like me to snoop. I'd always trusted her. But the uneasiness I'd been feeling wouldn't go away. I hesitated, then told myself I'd just take a quick look, to put my mind at ease. As I opened the browser, I saw she'd been logged into her email. My heart sank when I spotted a message flagged as important, from someone named Alec. The subject line read, "Last night was unforgettable." Against my better judgment, I clicked. It was short but damning. "Can't stop thinking about you. Let's make it happen again soon. Alec." My hands trembled as I scrolled down to see Jessica's reply. It was playful, full of emojis, and ended with, "Can't wait either. Thursday's still good, right?" I slammed the laptop shut, my chest heaving. Alec? Who the hell was Alec? I ran through the names of her coworkers, friends, anyone who could be this mystery man. He didn't match anyone I could think of. The shower stopped, and I quickly moved away from the counter. Jessica came into the kitchen wrapped in a towel, her face glowing from the steam. "Hey," she said, smiling as if nothing was wrong. "What's for dinner?" I stared at her. The words "last night was unforgettable" echoing in my head. For the first time in years, I couldn't bring myself to smile back. Couldn't shake it. The email had planted a seed of rage and doubt so deep I didn't know what to do with it. Over the next few days, I started to withdraw, watching Jessica like a hawk. She didn't seem to notice. In fact, she seemed even happier than usual, like she had a secret keeping her afloat. Every laugh, every affectionate pat on my shoulder, felt like a mockery. I wanted to confront her right then and there, demand answers, but something held me back. What if I was wrong? What if Alec was just a harmless friend or coworker? The problem was, Jessica wasn't giving me the benefit of the doubt. That much was clear. On Thursday, the day mentioned in her email, She left the house earlier than usual, wearing a black dress that hugged her curves in ways she usually saved for date nights. Big client meeting? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Yeah, she said, tossing her hair over her shoulder. Wish me luck. She kissed me on the cheek and walked out the door, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. I sat there for a moment, seething. Then, for the first time in our marriage, I did something I'd never thought I'd do. I followed her. From a safe distance, I trailed her car to a downtown hotel. She parked in the lot and strode confidently inside, where a man in a sharp suit and sunglasses was waiting for her. He looked at her like she was the only person in the world, and she practically melted into his arms. Alec. I felt sick as I watched them embrace. My mind screamed at me to burst in, to shout, to do something, but my feet stayed glued to the ground. Jessica and Alec disappeared through the hotel doors, and I sat there in the car, paralyzed by the weight of what I'd just seen. I wasn't ready for a confrontation. Not yet. I drove home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they hurt. The image of Jessica in Alec's arms was burned into my brain, replaying like a cruel movie on loop. I needed to act, but bursting in unprepared wasn't the answer. If I confronted her without proof, she'd deny it, twist it, make me the crazy one. No, I needed something solid, evidence she couldn't talk her way out of. That night, Jessica came home late, glowing like she'd just won the lottery. How was your meeting? I asked, forcing my tone to sound casual. It went really well, she said, beaming. Could be a big opportunity for me. I nodded, playing along, though my stomach churned at her lies. The next day, I reached out to an old friend, Matt, who worked in private investigations. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but he owed me a favor. Eric, he said when I explained the situation, this isn't the kind of thing you want to handle yourself. Let me do the digging. We'll get you everything you need. I agreed, relieved to have someone on my side. Within hours, Matt had set up surveillance, tracking her phone, placing a discreet GPS in her car, and keeping tabs on her movements. In the meantime, I played the role of the oblivious husband, acting as though nothing had changed. It was exhausting. Every kiss, every "I love you," felt like poison, but I needed to keep her off guard. A week later, Matt called. I've got something you're going to want to see, he said. My pulse quickened as he described what he'd uncovered. Messages, photos, and even audio recordings of Jessica and Alec. They were meeting regularly at hotels, restaurants, even in his car. And Alec wasn't just some random guy. He was someone far more dangerous than I could have imagined. He's connected, Matt said, his voice grim. This guy isn't just rich, he's powerful. You need to be careful. I didn't care. All I saw was red. Jessica wasn't just cheating. She was doing it with a man who could destroy us both. The betrayal burned, but my resolve hardened. If she thought she could humiliate me and walk away unscathed, she was dead wrong. It was time to set my plan in motion. I met Matt at a quiet bar downtown, where he slid a folder across the table. I hesitated for a moment, staring at it like it might explode. When I finally opened it, my stomach dropped. Alec wasn't just a man with money and good looks. He was a figure in organized crime. Powerful figure. His full name was Alec Moretti, and he wasn't just connected, he was a mob boss. The type of guy who didn't just play with power but crushed anyone who got in his way. The folder was full of pictures of Jessica with him, laughing, holding hands, kissing in public like they didn't have a care in the world. I felt a mixture of anger and fear. Was Jessica just an idiot who'd gotten herself involved with someone dangerous? Or had she known all along and didn't care what it could cost us? Eric, I don't know what your next move is, Matt said, his tone cautious. But you need to tread carefully. You don't mess with people like Moretti. I nodded, but inside I was boiling over. Careful wasn't in my vocabulary anymore. Jessica had dragged me into this mess, and now I had to play a game I never wanted to. That night, I went home and pretended everything was fine. Jessica greeted me at the door with a peck on the cheek, her sweet-smelling perfume doing nothing to cover up the stink of betrayal. How was your day? She asked, her voice light, as if she hadn't just been with a man who could kill me with a snap of his fingers. Same old, I replied, forcing a smile. But inside, I was screaming. I couldn't let her keep lying to my face. Not anymore. After she went to bed, I stayed up, staring at the folder Matt had given me. My anger solidified into something cold, something calculating. This wasn't just about Jessica's betrayal. This was about her putting me in danger, her letting someone like Alec into our lives without a second thought. She didn't care about me, about us. Fine. She'd made her choice. Now it was my turn. The revenge wouldn't be quick. It wouldn't be clean. But it would be unforgettable. The next morning, I started laying the groundwork. Jessica thought she was 2 steps ahead, but I was about to flip the entire game. First, I started distancing myself emotionally, just enough for her to notice. She'd make little comments like, "You've been so quiet lately?" Or, "Is everything okay?" I'd shrug and tell her I was tired or stressed from work. I knew it made her nervous. Then, I started gathering evidence, proof of her betrayal that would hold up in court. I hired Matt to retrieve call logs, bank statements, and anything else that could tie her to Alec's shady dealings. If she thought she'd leave this marriage with half of everything I'd worked for, she was sorely mistaken. But I didn't stop there. I needed to hit her where it hurt. Alec might have been dangerous, but he wasn't untouchable. Matt discovered that his empire had weak spots, rivals, dissatisfied business partners, and skeletons in his closet. I started making anonymous tips to the authorities, carefully leaking information that wouldn't point back to me but would rattle Alec's cage. Jessica, oblivious as ever, continued her charade. One evening, she came home wearing a new necklace, an extravagant gold chain with a ruby pendant. "Where'd that come from?" I asked, my tone neutral. She hesitated, her fingers brushing the pendant. "Oh, it's a gift from Rachel. She said I deserved something nice for helping her with that work presentation." I stared at her, struggling to keep my face blank. She didn't even bother coming up with a plausible lie anymore. "That's kind of her," I said, smiling faintly. But inside I was seething. The necklace was a symbol of her betrayal, and soon it would be her downfall. The final piece of the trap was something I'd been dreading, playing the doting husband one last time. I needed her to trust me, to believe I was clueless. So I planned a surprise weekend getaway. When I told her about it, her eyes lit up with fake excitement. "Wow, Eric, that sounds amazing. You've been so thoughtful lately," she said, wrapping her arms around me. I swallowed my disgust and kissed her cheek. The weekend trip would serve 2 purposes. It would give me an airtight alibi for what was about to unfold, and it would be the perfect stage to expose her lies. The countdown had begun. We arrived at a secluded cabin in the mountains late Friday afternoon. Jessica was all smiles, playing the role of the loving wife as she admired the picturesque scenery. "This is perfect, Eric," she said, slipping her arms around my waist. "Exactly what we needed." I nodded, keeping my face neutral. "Glad you think so." That night we sat by the fireplace, sipping wine. I could see her phone on the coffee table, buzzing intermittently with notifications. Each one sent a jolt of anger through me, but I played it cool. "Work keeping you busy even out here?" I asked casually, nodding toward the phone. She flinched, then laughed it off. "Just Rachel and some emails. Nothing important." Liar. The next morning, I told her I wanted to go on a hike. She seemed hesitant at first, probably wondering if Alec would try to contact her while we were out of range. But she eventually agreed. We trekked deep into the woods, the crisp air biting at our faces. Jessica seemed distracted, her eyes darting to her phone whenever we stopped. "What's on your mind?" I asked, trying to sound concerned. "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just work stuff." I smiled to myself. She had no idea what was coming. By the time we got back to the cabin, she was visibly anxious. She claimed she needed to rest and retreated to the bedroom, phone in hand. That was my cue. While she scrolled and texted away, I pulled out my laptop. Matt had sent me a file the day before, one I'd been waiting for. It contained the ultimate piece of evidence. Audio recordings of Jessica and Alec discussing their relationship, and his illegal activities. I synced my laptop to the cabin's Bluetooth speakers, set the volume to max, and hit play. Jessica's voice echoed through the cabin. I can't keep lying to him much longer, Alec. He's starting to ask questions. Alec's smooth, arrogant tone followed. Relax, babe. He's too clueless to figure it out. And even if he does, what's he gonna do? I've got connections. He wouldn't dare. From the bedroom, I heard a thud, followed by frantic footsteps. Jessica burst into the living room, her face pale and panicked. Eric, what the hell is this? She demanded, her voice shaking. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee. Oh, just a little something I thought we should discuss. Her eyes darted around, looking for an escape, but there was none. It's over, Jessica, I said calmly. I know everything. For the first time in our marriage, she was completely speechless. Jessica stared at me, her face a mix of shock and terror. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Cat got your tongue? I said, setting my coffee cup down with a deliberate clink. Go ahead. I'm dying to hear how you spin this one. Eric, it's not what you think? She finally stammered, her voice shaky. I raised an eyebrow. Not what I think, because what I think is that you've been screwing around with a mob boss and dragging me into your mess. Did I miss anything? She took a step closer, her hands trembling. I made a mistake. Okay? I didn't mean for it to go this far. I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound that made her flinch. A mistake? Meeting him at hotels? Lying to my face every day? That's not a mistake, Jessica. That's a choice. Over and over again. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. She'd chosen this path, not me. Eric, please, she pleaded, her voice breaking. I can fix this. We can fix this. I love you. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Love? You don't even know what that word means. You don't love me, Jessica. You love what you can get out of me. And guess what? That ends now. Her tears turned to anger, her face twisting with frustration. You don't understand. Alec, he's dangerous. If he finds out about this. Oh, don't worry, I interrupted, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Alec's going to have plenty to worry about soon enough. You see, I've been busy while you've been out playing house with him. Jessica's eyes widened, panic creeping into her expression. What did you do? I stood, taking my time as I approached her. Let's just say Alec's little empire isn't as untouchable as he thinks. And you're going to get a front row seat to watch it all fall apart. Her jaw dropped, and she shook her head furiously. Eric, no. You don't know what you're dealing with. If you go after Alec, he'll destroy me. I finished for her. Yeah, I've heard the threats. But here's the thing, Jessica. I've got nothing left to lose. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She was finally realizing just how far I was willing to go. Pack your things, I said, my voice cold and steady. When we get back to the city, I want you out of the house. And don't think for a second you're walking away with anything but the clothes on your back. Jessica sank onto the couch, her face pale and defeated. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. Not of Alec, but of me. And that was just the beginning. Jessica was quiet for the rest of the weekend. She barely spoke, barely ate, and avoided me like I was a stranger. But I wasn't done yet. On Monday morning, back in the city, I set the next phase of my plan in motion. I handed over every piece of evidence Matt and I had gathered to the authorities anonymously. Photos, recordings, financial transactions, all linking Alec to his illicit empire. It was enough to make him squirm, and I knew the clock was ticking before he realized the walls were closing in. Jessica, meanwhile, hadn't wasted time packing. When I got home that evening, her bags were by the door, and she stood there waiting for me, her face an unreadable mask. I'm leaving, she said quietly. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorway. Good. Saves me the trouble of throwing you out. She hesitated, like she wanted to say something else, but then she shook her head. You don't understand what you've started, Eric. You think you're in control, but Alec, he doesn't forgive. And he doesn't forget. I stepped closer, narrowing my eyes. And you think I care? He's your problem now. Run to him. Tell him I'm the big bad husband who exposed his dirty secrets. See if he offers you the same protection I did. Her lips trembled, but she held her ground. I didn't want this to happen, she whispered. Well, it did, I said coldly. Now live with it. She grabbed her bags and left without another word. The door slammed behind her, and I stood there, the house eerily quiet. The next day, I got confirmation from Matt that Alex's world was starting to crumble. Raids were happening at his businesses, his associates were being questioned, and his operations were grinding to a halt. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Jessica's departure gave me access to everything she'd left behind. Her phone, her emails, even the necklace Alec had given her. I took it all, documenting every shred of evidence I could find to ensure she'd never come back looking for a piece of my life again. Then came the icing on the cake. Through Matt, I leaked Alec's affair with Jessica to his rivals. Dangerous men who didn't take kindly to their associates getting sloppy, especially with someone like her. The effect was immediate. By the end of the week, Alec was no longer a rising star in his world. He was a liability, and liabilities, they don't last long in his line of work. Jessica called me once that night, her voice frantic. What have you done, Eric? Alec's furious. He knows someone's sabotaging him, and he's starting to ask questions. I smirked, though she couldn't see it. Good. Maybe he'll figure out what betrayal feels like. Her breath hitched, and then the line went dead. It wasn't over yet, but I was getting closer to the endgame. The fallout from my actions was spreading like wildfire. Alec's empire was in shambles. His shipments intercepted, his trusted associates flipping under pressure. It was everything I'd hoped for, but Alec wasn't the type to go down quietly, and I knew the danger was far from over. Jessica hadn't called again, but I wasn't naive enough to think she was out of the picture. Matt confirmed she was staying in a high-rise apartment downtown, one that Alec had paid for. I had no doubt she was clinging to him, hoping he'd protect her from the mess she'd helped create. But Alec had bigger problems. One evening, as I was reviewing more evidence Matt had sent, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. Eric Sterling? A deep, unfamiliar voice said. My stomach tightened. Who's asking? You don't know me, but let's just say I'm someone with an interest in Alec Moretti's recent troubles. I didn't speak, waiting for him to continue. You've been busy, the man said, a hint of amusement in his tone. And while I can appreciate your enthusiasm, you've created a problem. My grip on the phone tightened. I'm listening. Alec's reckless, and your little crusade has put him in a corner. That makes him dangerous. To you, to everyone. You want revenge, I get it. But if you push him too far, it won't end well. For anyone. Is that a threat? I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. No, the man said calmly. It's a warning. You want Alec gone? Fine. But let the professionals handle it. The line went dead, and I stared at the phone, my mind racing. Whoever that was, they weren't bluffing. Alec had enemies I hadn't even considered, and I'd just thrown gasoline on an already volatile fire. The next morning, I got another call, this time from Jessica. Eric, please, you have to stop, she begged, her voice frantic. Alec's losing control. He's paranoid, lashing out at everyone. If he finds out you're behind this, then he'll know what it feels like to lose everything. I snapped. You don't understand, she cried. He's not just going to hurt you. He'll hurt anyone close to you. Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, I felt a sliver of doubt. I'd been so focused on taking them down that I hadn't considered the collateral damage. But then I remembered her lies, her betrayal, and the risks she'd taken without a second thought. This is your mess, Jessica, I said coldly. And now you get to clean it up. Before she could respond, I hung up. It was time to tighten the noose. The next few days were tense. I knew Alec would retaliate, but I didn't know when or how. Jessica's warning echoed in my mind, but I pushed it aside, refusing to let fear dictate my next move. Late one night, as I was going over the final pieces of evidence with Matt, I got a notification from the security cameras I'd installed around my house. My heart pounded as I opened the app on my phone. 2 men, dressed in black, were creeping toward my backyard. "Matt," I said, my voice low but urgent. "I've got company." "Stay calm," he replied. "Call the cops and don't engage. Do you hear me?" I nodded, already dialing 911. But even as I gave the dispatcher my address, I knew the police wouldn't arrive in time. The men moved with precision, disabling my outdoor lights and cutting through the back gate. They had weapons, crowbars, and something glinting that looked like a knife. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the door, my pulse racing. They weren't getting in without a fight. The first man tried the back door, finding it locked. He motioned to his partner, who began working on the lock with a set of tools. My chest tightened as I watched them through the security feed. "Come on, you bastards," I muttered under my breath, gripping the bat tightly. Before they could get the door open, the sound of sirens filled the air. The men froze, exchanging panicked glances before retreating the way they came. I exhaled a shaky breath as the cops arrived, their flashing lights illuminating the street. The men were gone, but I knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, Matt confirmed my suspicions. The men had ties to Alec, low-level thugs sent to send a message. "He's testing you," Matt said grimly, "seeing how far he can push before you break." "I'm not breaking," I replied, my jaw set. But deep down, I knew Alec was escalating. And if I didn't end this soon, he'd come back with more than just a couple of hired goons. Jessica called again that evening, her voice trembling. "Alec knows, Eric," she said, barely above a whisper. "He knows you're behind this. He's furious, and he's not going to stop until..." "Until what?" I snapped. "Until I give up? Roll over and let him win? Not happening." "You don't get it," she hissed. "He's coming for you. For us." Her words sent a chill down my spine, but I refused to let her see my fear. "Then let him come," I said coldly before hanging up. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was a fight for survival, and I wasn't backing down. The next day, I met with Matt to strategize. We knew Alec was becoming increasingly unhinged, but we had one last card to play, a revelation that would not only shake Alec's world but sever his ties to Jessica completely. It was risky, but I was past caring. Matt had uncovered something explosive. Jessica had been sharing Alec's secrets with someone else. Text messages and encrypted emails revealed she'd been feeding information to one of Alec's rivals, a man named Victor Alvarez, who had just as much to gain from Alec's downfall. "She's playing both sides," Matt explained, sliding the evidence across the table. My head spun. Jessica wasn't just a liar. She was a manipulator on a scale I hadn't imagined. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd betrayed Alec too. "That's it," I said, my voice hard. "This is how we end it." That night, I made my move. Using a burner phone, I sent all the incriminating messages and emails to Alec. The text was short and sweet. "Thought you'd want to know who's really stabbing you in the back. You're welcome." I didn't expect an immediate response, but I knew Alec wouldn't take long to act. Sure enough, less than 24 hours later, Jessica called me in a panic. "Eric, what the hell did you do?" she screamed. "Alec knows about Victor. He's furious. He thinks I was working with him the whole time." I smiled to myself, savoring her desperation. "Sounds like a personal problem," I said coolly. "You don't understand," she cried. "He's dangerous, Eric. If he thinks I betrayed him, he'll kill me. Maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to sleep with a mob boss and sell him out," I said. "You made your bed, Jessica. Now lie in it." She sobbed into the phone, begging me to help her, but I hung up without another word. I'd done my part. Alec had his proof, and Jessica was finally facing the consequences of her actions. But it wasn't over yet. Alec's retaliation was swift. That night, Matt sent me a link to a news article. "Violence erupts in downtown apartment complex. Sources suggest gang retaliation." Jessica's name wasn't mentioned, but I knew she was at the center of it. Alec had cut her off, and she'd been left to fend for herself. I should have felt guilty, but I didn't. She'd put me in danger, betrayed our marriage, and dragged me into her mess. This was her reckoning, not mine. Now all that was left was to deal with Alec one final time. The news of the downtown violence spread quickly. Alec's empire was crumbling, his men turning on him or being picked off by rivals. Jessica had vanished, and though I didn't know where she was, I could guess she wasn't safe. Meanwhile, I continued to work in the shadows. Matt and I compiled one last package of evidence, this time for Alec's more powerful enemies. It was everything they needed to completely dismantle his operations. His financial records, his supplier lists, and most importantly, the locations of his remaining safe houses. "Are you sure about this?" Matt asked as we finished putting the file together. "Once this goes out, Alec won't have anywhere to run." "That's the point," I said firmly. With Matt's help, I anonymously delivered the information to Victor Alvarez, Alec's most dangerous rival. I knew Victor would waste no time using it to his advantage. The next few days were chaos. Reports flooded in about raids, shootouts, and arrests. Alec's name was being whispered in fear, but his influence was rapidly disappearing. The authorities were closing in, and Victor was taking over what remained of Alec's turf. Jessica called me one last time during the aftermath. "You've destroyed everything," she sobbed. Her voice was hoarse, and I could hear the desperation in her words. "Everything," I repeated mockingly.
No, Jessica.
"You destroyed everything. I just made sure you couldn't drag me down with you." "You think you've won?" she spat, her tone turning venomous. "You think Alec's just going to let this go? You're a dead man, Eric." I chuckled coldly. "I'm not the one hiding in some dingy motel, hoping he doesn't find me first." Her sharp intake of breath told me I'd hit a nerve. Before she could say another word, I hung up for the final time. That same night, Alec made the mistake I'd been waiting for. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, he arranged a meeting with his remaining allies at one of his safe houses. What he didn't know was that Victor's men, and law enforcement, had been tipped off. By morning, the headlines told the story. Mob boss Alec Moretti killed in raid. Authorities confirm key arrests in organized crime crackdown. I stared at the screen, a mix of relief and grim satisfaction washing over me. Alec was gone. Jessica was out of my life, and for the first time in months, I could finally breathe. But the battle had left scars I wasn't sure would ever heal. There was just one thing left to do: reclaim what was mine and move on. In the weeks after Alec's death, life slowly started to stabilize. The house felt emptier without Jessica, but instead of sadness, I felt relief. For the first time in years, I didn't have to look over my shoulder or second-guess the person sleeping next to me. Legally, things were wrapped up quicker than I'd expected. Jessica didn't even contest the divorce. She likely couldn't afford to, both financially and emotionally. The lawyers made it clear that she had no claim to the house or my assets. She disappeared into obscurity, and honestly, I didn't care to know where she went. Matt and I met for drinks to celebrate the end of the ordeal. "You pulled it off," he said, clinking his beer against mine. "Took down a mob boss, burned a cheating wife, and walked away unscathed. Hell of a story." "Unscathed?" I laughed, shaking my head. "I've got scars that'll never heal." But yeah, I walked away. The truth was, I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like a survivor. I played a dangerous game, one that could have easily ended with me 6 feet under. Still, there was a sense of justice in knowing that Jessica and Alec had paid the price for their betrayal. In the months that followed, I started piecing my life back together. I threw myself into work, remodeled the house, and even reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. One day, as I was cleaning out the last of Jessica's things, I came across an old photo album from the early years of our relationship. I flipped through it, seeing the smiles, the memories, the life we'd once built together. It didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Jessica's betrayal had shattered the illusion of what we'd had, but it also taught me something important. Trust is fragile, and once it's broken, it's almost impossible to repair. For now, I'm focusing on me. I'm not in a rush to find someone new, not ready to open myself up again just yet. But I've learned to listen to my gut, to trust myself in a way I never did before. If there's one thing I've taken from all this, it's that betrayal doesn't define you. It breaks you, sure, but it also reveals your strength. So here I am, stronger, wiser, and ready to build a life that's mine, and mine alone. To anyone reading this who's been betrayed, don't let it consume you. Take your time, plan your steps, and when the moment comes, take back control. Because trust me, there's no better revenge than moving on and thriving.